Hi everybody, Lynn Burke here with MajorLeagueFishing.com, sitting alongside one of the best on the Bassmaster Elite Series Tour, Mr. Todd Faircloth. Always have loved Todd. Number one, he's a Texan like I am, and we hail from different parts of the state, but one thing that's pretty common around Texas, or maybe I should say used to be common before the drought kind of put its grips on our state, was hydrilla. There are a lot of hydrilla in a lot of lakes. My favorite lake, Lake Fork, was full of hydrilla. Lake Ray Roberts at one time was full of hydrilla. Of course, you're from down in the Sam Rayburn country, and it was known as a hydrilla forest for many, many years. And probably because you fished Sam Rayburn, I'm sure a lot, you developed an expertise at flipping hydrilla. So let's talk about that. How is flipping hydrilla different from flipping, say, standing timber?
Well, you're usually dealing with, whenever you say flipping or pitching hydrilla, we're normally fishing, 10 foot out to as deep as 20 foot, and you're focusing on the outside edge of the hydrilla lines. And, what you look for is basically the same thing you would look for if there wasn't any grass there. You look for points out on the main lake. You look for channel swings that run up against the point. And what people need to keep in mind whenever they're fishing grass like that is that the fish follow the contour of the lake, and they use the grass as cover.
Right.
So I think a lot of people get confused about, well, I'm just going to go flip grass or pitch grass, and they just go down a grass line, a straight grass line, and there's no contour change within it, and they don't get any bites. But it's kind of a tedious method, a way to fish. You have to work at it. But I like to take a big Strike King hack attack jig, a 1 1/4 ounce.
Is there a reason that you like the hack attack jig over, say, the Denny Brower model?
It's designed specifically, in my opinion, for fishing grass. It's got a great big hook in it. We've used, I like to use Sunline braid, 50 to 65 pound test Sunline braid, and you need a big, strong hook in it. The head design is designed in a way for it to penetrate the grass real easy. I'd say about 95% of your bites are going to come on the initial fall. So the jig has to be able to penetrate the grass. And that real fast falling 1 1/4 ounce jig is what you're looking for. You're looking for a reaction bite. And when that jig comes crashing down through there, those fish don't have a whole lot of time to think about it. They either got to get it or it's going to go past them. So, I grew up fishing from Sam Rayburn, Toledo Bend. I've caught them doing it at you mentioned Lake Fork. A lot of the lakes in Texas and in the South, anywhere in the South, this technique will work. Wherever you're dealing with, it doesn't have to be hydrilla. It can be milfoil. It can be, a coontail. But usually the hydrilla grows deeper, and this technique works better in hydrilla.
And then when you move up north, which you guys do every year into the Great Lakes area, into the Northeast, you're dealing with a lot of grass, not hydrilla, but you're dealing with a lot of grass, and the smallmouths relate to that just like the largemouths do down south.
And the largemouth as well. I know Lake Oneida, we fish in Syracuse a lot, has that same type of stuff. It has more like cabbage grass and stuff like that, but the technique works the same there as it does, in Texas. But you're just dealing with a little bit different grass, but it works the same way. I've caught fish doing it in Oneida as well.
Let's talk about colors. In general, I've always thought bass fishing in general revolves around 3 basic ideas, at least in Texas where we're from, and that's shad, sunfish or brim, and then crawfish. You get into the Great Lakes, you get into the Southeast, you get into blueback herring, get into other bait fish, but basically you've still got an offshore pelagic type bait fish. You've got the sunfish that are up around the edges, and you've got crawfish just about anywhere in the country. So what colors do you use? A lot of guys say it's pretty simple, and yet when I go to the tackle store, it's not very simple.
Yeah, like you said, you go to the tackle store, and there's a zillion jigs, and there's a zillion jig colors. But I'm a firm believer you can go anywhere in the country with a black and blue jig, and you can catch fish with it. I also will throw in like a green pumpkin jig or like a pumpkin green jig. But I can go take a black and blue jig, and say you're fishing a real clear lake, and the fish are feeding on brim, for instance. Well, a black and blue jig, you can take and tip it with like I like to use like a rodent on the back of my jig whenever I'm doing it. You can tip it with like a watermelon rodent, and it gives it kind of that clear silhouette. I know a lot of brim, a lot of sunfish, if you'll look at the end of their tail, it's got a real green hue to it.
Yeah.
And I usually, most of the time when I'm flipping a big jig in the grass, I'm trying to imitate a brim, not a crawdad. And that's their primary forage when they get out there, is they're feeding on brim, bluegill, and stuff like that. So I'll take a pumpkin green jig, like a little gator, or a black blue jig, and kind of mix and match the trailers that I use with it. And sometimes it can make a difference. I really like a black blue under low light conditions, and I really like a pumpkin green, or like a green pumpkin, whenever it gets real bright and sunny. So just keep it simple, and mix and match your trailers. And if it looks good to you and you have confidence in it, whenever you look at it in the water, you're probably gonna catch fish on.
Probably so. Let's talk about two ideas that you kind of just brought up. Number one, I want to talk about the trailer, but before we get there, jigs come in different sizes. And you talked about keeping it simple. So how do you keep that idea of keeping it simple without having 5,000 jigs in your box of varying sizes, shapes, and colors?
Well, for this specific technique, I wouldn't go any lighter than say a 1 ounce jig. I use a 1 1/4 more so than a 1 ounce, but a 1 ounce to a 1 1/4 ounce is what you need for penetrating that real thick grass out on the outside edge. But just for a basic all-around jig, for like swimming, flipping docks, pitching the laydowns and stuff like that, you can't go wrong with a 1/2 ounce jig. Maybe a 3/8 ounce, but just get you a quality jig, a jig that you have confidence in, and spread the weed guard out. I like to spread the weed guard out on my jig. Not only does that help with hook penetration, but I think it kind of serves as a rudder, and it keeps the jig falling straight down, as opposed to if it's just a little pencil hairbrush, type weed guard. It has a tendency to want to spiral on you a little bit. But a jig is a bait that has been around since the beginning of time, and it's gonna stay around. It's not going anywhere. It is a big fish producer. It's probably the most versatile bait that you can put in your tackle box. And if you don't understand and have confidence in fishing a jig, you need to learn.
Yeah, you do. Let's talk about one aspect of that confidence. Again, you talked about keeping it simple. When I go to Bass Pro Shops, when I go to the tackle store, and I look at trailers for jigs, again, there's a wall full of them as far as the eye can see. So when do you go narrow on your trailer? When do you kind of go for something a little broader?
You can take a 1/2 ounce jig, and you can put a rodent on it, and it'll fall fast. Okay, You can take a 1/2 ounce jig and put like a rage crawl on it, and it'll fall kind of the same as like a 3/8 ounce jig with a rodent on it. So you can affect the rate of the fall of a jig by the type of trailer you put on it. Normally, if I'm looking for a fast falling jig, one I'm wanting to penetrate cover with, I'm going to use a sleek trailer, like a chunk or like the rodent. I'm going to use a sleek trailer. It doesn't have a whole lot of flash to it, a lot of vibration. I want it to go down through the cover, and I want it to go fast through the cover. If I'm dragging a football jig, or if I'm pitching in muddy water to laydowns or buckbrush or something like that, I'll tendency to use something like the rage crawl. It's got a lot of action to it, puts off a lot of vibration, and it's a little bit slower falling jig. I can keep it in the strike zone longer, and I'll tendency go with a more bulky, type of trailer. But general rule for me is muddy water or stained water or cold water, I want a bulky trailer. If it's during the summer months and it's clear water situation, I'll go with a more sleeker trailer.
Let's talk about the rod and the reel setup. Obviously, when you flip jigs, that's pretty specialized.
It is, especially when you're dealing with, what we're talking about, fishing, the hydrilla, the deep hydrilla, pitching that big 1 1/4 ounce jig. You got to have the equipment that can handle that stuff. I like to use a 7'6" flipping rod. I pair it with normally 50-pound sunline braid.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll go up a little bit in line size, but usually on a basic simple rule, I use 50-pound 90% of the time. And you got to have a strong reel, and I like a fast reel because you're constantly pitching your bait out there, reeling it up, and pitching your bait out there and reeling it up. And I want a reel that's going to take up a line in a big hurry. But I like to use a big handle for power whenever you hook one of those big fish, and you can get them up and get them out of there. But I like a flipping stick that's stout down towards the reel, but I want it to have a pretty good parabolic bend in it. Whenever I set the hook on with that braided line, it absorbs a lot of that shock, and it doesn't seem like I lose as many fish with more of a parabolic bend in my rod as compared to like just a broomstick handle,
Right.
But you got to take that braided line into consideration. It's no stretch there, and when you hit them and they're that close to you like that, your rod's got to have a little bit of give, or you're gonna rip the hook right out of it.
You mentioned a little bit about this a moment ago about where in the grass to fish, and about that you almost have to, like timber, you have to kind of standing timber, you have to kind of imagine it's not there and fish the structural features that are underneath. But one thing that we're kind of moving in that direction right now in the summertime, hydrilla especially will mat out on the surface, and you get these very dense, just football fields, and sometimes it's hard to get to some of those structural features. And I've always in the summertime, I always think when hydrilla mats out that there's almost like it's like a tent at the beach, so to speak. It covers the fish. It keeps the sunlight from penetrating through very easily. Underneath, kind of on the bottom, it's kind of open, and they swim around a little bit. So how do you figure out where to throw it, and how do you punch it through to those spots? And then when you get it there, what do you do with it?
Well, basically, whenever the hydrilla mats out like that, fish follow edges, and either on a grass lake, it's pretty simplified. They're either going to be on the outside edge or they're going to be on the inside edge of the grass line. And the summertime, whenever the grass mats up and it gets up on top of the water or starts to get up on top of the water, the fish are going to be out on the outside edge. They want to be close to the deeper water. That's where the cooler water temperatures are. That's where all the oxygen is in the water. And the majority of the fish are going to be on the outside edge. So I look for corners. And when I say a corner, it might be a grass line comes down and then it makes a L shape or something.
Okay.
I look for points. I really like points. I really, really like intersections. I've preached this in a lot of seminars I do. What's the busiest thing on a highway? It's an intersection. That's where you get all your traffic. Well, if you find like an intersection out there in the water, you have fish coming from this way and from this way and from the other way. And if you can get in that intersection there, you got the best of both worlds. You got a lot of fish coming to you, whereas opposed if you're just fishing, the side of a point, for instance, you got one wave of fish, coming down through there. So just keep it simple. Keep simple stuff like that in mind, and that's why points are always good. Is if you have a point that comes out like this, you have fish that travel this side of the point, you have fish that travel this side of the point, and they stop out on the point to feed. So that's why points are always good. Drains are really, really good this time of year as well. Right. You'll have a big flat that runs out into the main lake or in a creek flat or off the mouth of a creek flat, and say you'll have water depth pretty much the same, for 300 or 400 yards, and then you'll have like a 7 or 8 foot flap, and then you'll have a 15-foot depression in the middle of that flat. Well, where are all the fish going to be? They're going to be right there in that depression, or what we call a drain in the south. So they follow the contour lines and use the grass as cover. That's the most simplified way to approach a grass lake.
Let's talk about what you do when you flip the jig. Obviously, a lot of fish are going to take it on the fall. But if you don't get bit on the fall, do you hop it up? Do you raise the rod slow, don't let it fall again? What do you do then?
All I'm doing is I'm covering water whenever I'm flipping a jig. And what I mean by that, people are thinking, man, you're fishing a jig. You can't be fishing fast. Well, that's not true. I'm fishing pretty fast. I'm covering it efficiently. And what I mean by that is I'm going to make a pitch about 6 or 7 feet out in front of the boat. I'm gonna let all the reel off, the slack out of my reel, and I want that jig to fall on a slack line. And when I'm fishing the braid, I'm watching that braid as it's falling down. If it blinks up at me, I mean, that's a no-brainer. You just reel down and set the hook. If the braid stops short of where it should fall and hit the bottom, you're either hung in the grass or a fish has got it. So you want to reel up on it, and if you feel pressure, you set the hook. But not, like I said earlier, 95% of the time the fish are going to hit it on the initial fall. But if they don't hit it on the initial fall, I'm going to pitch my jig out there, let it fall on a slack line, which is very important. Don't put any tension on the jig. It won't come through the grass efficiently. It won't hit the bottom. It'll get hung up. So it's very important to let it fall on a slack line. But if I don't get a bite on the initial fall, I'll hop it a couple of times. I might hop it one more time, but I'm reeling it back up and I'm pitching to another spot. And generally, it'll be 4 feet away from the first pitch I made. And I'm constantly just going down the grass line, and I'll pitch in front of the boat, I'll pitch to the left of the boat, and I'll pitch to the right of the boat. And I'm just kind of, I guess you'd say, mowing the grass.
Well, you've been very successful at doing that down through the years, and leads to one last question. I mean, you grew up down there fishing Sam Rayburn in Toledo Bend. You're kind of one of the Texas grass gurus, so to speak. You've been highly successful on the BASS tournament circuits, the Elite Series. You came as close as I think it's possible to come to winning Angler of the Year without doing it. You've done a lot of great things in your angling career. With this technique, is there one moment, is there one tournament, is there one fish that stands out above all the rest?
You know, I probably one of the I guess highlights of, or not highlights of my career, but one of the memories that I cherish the most was me and my dad won a team championship together on Sam Rayburn Lake. I believe it was in 1997, and it was a 2-day event, and we had kind of done poorly the first day. We were kind of poorly from what we thought we should have done. We were in like 20th place, and then the last day we caught a really, really big bag using that technique on Sam Rayburn Lake and come back and won the tournament. So that's one of my fondest memories is growing up, you know, fishing. It was something I got to share with my dad, and it was a technique that we loved to do together, and we won a lot of money doing it together on Sam Rayburn and Toledo Bend as well.
Well, I tell you what, being a family guy too, there is nothing like fishing memories with your dad.
Absolutely.
And I know you got some kiddos, and I do too, and got to do the same thing in their direction.
Absolutely. I can't wait. You know, my 9-year-old is already, I've been gone, I think this will be my 4th week now on the road, and I fished, I think, 18 days in a row as I've been gone. This is my first day off in like 18 days. Wow. So, but I know when I get home, the first thing my oldest son's going to ask me is, when we going fishing?
Dad, let's go fishing. Todd Faircloth, Sam Rayburn boy, he's one of the best at flipping a jig into hydrilla and other grass. If you want to learn more about Todd Faircloth and the other Major League Fishing anglers and the techniques that they employ to play the game and catch the fish, go to MajorLeagueFishing.com.